Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me this week for a special podcast. Today, I'm going to take a look at the current writer's strike that you may or may not be aware of. I spent the whole week researching this thing so that I can explain it to you in a way that is easy to understand. For real, guys, I actually tried this week. So first, I'm going to take a look at the immediate impact of the strike and let you know how this affects your favorite shows and franchises like Star Trek. Then, I'm going to examine the main reasons behind this strike, as well as who or what is to blame. Next, I will let you know how the negotiations have gone so far, and what that says about how long this strike could last. Then finally, I will address what long-term effects this strike could have on the industry, including why it could lead to the end of the streaming service Paramount Plus. Also, there are time codes for each subject in the description of this video, if you would like to skip around to what you actually care about. But I also have some good things to share with you this week, which will start with the news of a brand new movie from Babylon 5 creator JMS that will take the franchise somewhere it has never gone before. I also saw the film Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was just released, and I will give you my quick no-spoiler review of that, as well as a spoiler review for those who have already seen it. Again, I have put time codes for each section in the description of the video. Then before I go, I want to address a supposed leak from an upcoming series that I've been following for some time, and why I think is probably not what fans think. So first, let's talk about this writer's strike. Now, if you are aware or not aware, in this past week, I believe it was Tuesday, the Writers Guild of America went on strike against the producers in Hollywood. This only affects American productions, so anything being produced or written outside of America is not affected by this. So when it comes to Star Trek, it looks like Star Trek and maybe Paramount kind of planned for this strike because the next year or so has already been kind of parceled out. So it looks like we're getting just a little bit here and a little bit there instead of in past years when we got like every Star Trek show back to back to back to back. If you notice in 2023, they've kind of put one out in like the spring and then one out in the summer and then one out in the fall and kind of like spaced them out. And that is almost assuredly because that Paramount knew that this strike was coming. So first, let's talk about Strange New Worlds. The second season of Strange New Worlds is scheduled to come out on June 15th. And nothing is hurting that. I mean, Strange New World Season 2 was actually filmed all the way back in 2022. So that season has been done for some time, and there's nothing that's going to affect that. Season 3 of Strange New Worlds was greenlit this year, and they have begun filming. That tells me that the scripts for these episodes are done, which means that the writer's strike probably will not affect the third season of Strange New Worlds to the point of it not being able to be completed. Now, there is a caveat to this that I will talk about later. But as far as it stands right now with the Writers Guild strike the way it is, it looks like season 3 of Strange New Worlds will be fine because the scripts for the episodes have already been complete. Many series actually keep the writers of their episodes on set with them so that they can do rewrites on the spot. Any show that does that obviously won't be able to do that right now. And also actors won't be able to improvise lines. They have to read the lines that were written on these scripts whenever they were written. So having said that, season 3 of Strange New Worlds will continue filming, but it will no doubt be affected by not being able to consult with writers during the filming process because of this strike. When it comes to Lower Decks and Prodigy, the answer is a little easier. First of all, we know that season 4 of Lower Decks is already complete and will be released at the end of the summer in 2023. Season 5 is being created right now. When it comes to Prodigy, they don't have a renewal for season 3 yet. So all we know about Prodigy is that a second season of Prodigy will be released towards the end of 2023. Now, if you recall, the first season of Prodigy was split up with 10 episodes being released, and then a year later, the next 10 episodes in the season were released. So the first season of Prodigy was actually 20 episodes that released over a year's time. It's unknown if the second season of Prodigy will be like that, but I'm guessing that if this strike does last a long time, that they will use Prodigy the same way they did in the first season and kind of split their two halves of their season up. And also, if they're not getting a third season, it would be a better way to kind of like prolong that intellectual property until they have to ultimately cancel it. But the reason that these two series really will not be affected by the strike is that for some reason, animated series are not affected by the Writers Guild of America strike. They can continue producing scripts. I'm guessing that the writers that work on animated series are part of a different guild that have a different set of negotiations going on and a different contract and all that kind of stuff. Because everywhere that I read, it says that anything that's animated will not be affected by the writer's strike. So if you're a fan of Lower Decks like I am, or if you're a fan of Prodigy, or if you're a fan of both, you don't have to worry because it looks like Lower Decks and Prodigy will continue to be produced as long as people want to watch them. When it comes to Star Trek Discovery, we know that they're currently reshooting episodes of season 5 right now so that it could be the last season. So much like with Strange New Worlds, as long as everything has been written, they can continue filming, but no rewrites will be allowed while the strike is going on. Now, I'm sure that Star Trek Discovery will want to finish filming these scenes that they're doing for season 5 before the end of June, because as I will talk about a little bit later, after the writer's strike, we could get a strike from the directors and a strike from the actors. And once those two things happen, everything's shut down. So the fact that Discovery is in their final season and they are doing reshoots, I'm sure that they are just busting butt to try and get everything done before the end of June. I would think that we will for sure see the last season of Discovery as planned towards the beginning of 2024 is what I believe that they said that we would be seeing season 5 of Discovery. So I'm sure that was probably still on track. But again, no rewrites for any of the episodes or scenes that are being filmed will be allowed. But since these are already rewritten episodes and reshoots, I don't know how much more rewrites that Discovery can take. So I'm guessing that Discovery season 5 will be fine and will be released when we expect it. Now let's talk about the two new projects for Star Trek. And these are the two things that are going to be affected the most. First, let's talk about Starfleet Academy, because that was the thing that was announced first. And when it was announced, they said that they had a writer's room formed for it and that they were working to begin production in 2024. Obviously, if they are in a writer's room stage and the writers are on strike, that means the show is on hiatus. So Starfleet Academy is definitely on hiatus until the writer's strike is lifted, which definitely puts their 2024 release date in jeopardy. I'm guessing we will not see Starfleet Academy in 2024 unless this strike is over in like the next couple of weeks, which I highly doubt it will be. So it could be a while till we see Starfleet Academy. In concert with that, the Section 31 film is very interesting because plans for this story had been around since like 2017 when Michelle Yeoh initially pitched the idea to the producers of Star Trek Discovery. And at that time, Alex Kurtzman stated that a writer's room had been created and that scripts had been written. Now, since there was such a long period of time before that announcement and the announcement of a new film based on Section 31, we have no idea if those scripts are what is being used for this film. If I had to guess, I don't know, I could see it both ways. I could see them saying, hey, we already have this script for Section 31. Let's do this film because we know a writer's strike is coming, or that they just got a new writer's room for Section 31 and now that is on hiatus too. It's probably more likely the latter. I doubt that they would reuse something just to reuse it or just to push it out. And like I said, once June hits and the directors and the actors go on strike, then it doesn't matter if you have a script for Section 31 unless you film the whole thing too, which I doubt they can film this whole movie in 2 months or under 2 months. So I'm guessing that both Starfleet Academy and Section 31 are on hiatus until the writer's strike is lifted, which is not cool. I mean, it goes without saying that both Starfleet Academy and Section 31 have kind of polarized Star Trek fans. You have large swaths of fans that are for and against both these projects, which I guess is a good and a bad thing. But either way, I think that these are the biggest casualties in regard to Star Trek and the writer's strike. So if you're waiting for Starfleet Academy and Section 31, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, depending on how long this strike lasts. Other projects that are now on indefinite hiatus until the writer's strike is lifted that you may be fans of. Cobra Kai, they announced that they shut down production on their final season. That show is kind of weird too because you've got kids on that show that are growing up faster and faster. So by the time that final season comes out, I mean, a lot of those kids may have kids and it may be hard to pull off that they're still, seniors or juniors in high school. So it's really too bad that Cobra Kai got shut down. And again, it's its final season. So who knows the delay that we're going to get. Cobra Kai had been pretty good about releasing a new season every year. It looks like they will not be able to do that in 2024. Also, The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead are filming their final seasons and they had to shut down production. So fans of those series will have to wait a little bit longer for them. Stranger Things is also filming their last season. They shut down. I was really looking forward to that too. So again, that is a series that with kids that are now young adults, and we're supposed to believe that these kids are in high school or just out of high school. I'm not sure if there's going to be a time jump in the last season of Stranger Things. There has been rumors of that. So who knows, when that's going to come out now. And then another very popular show, Severance, was filming its second season, and it has now been shut down. Those are scripted series that have been shut down. There's also non-scripted series that are immediately shut down. Those would be like Saturday Night Live, Last Week with John Oliver, and all your late night talk shows. Those have all been immediately shut down. As an average fan, you're probably thinking, when will I really feel the impact of this strike? Fans won't really feel the impact no matter how long the strike lasts until the beginning of 2024. It looks like studios have backlogged content in preparation for this strike. If you're wondering why some of your favorite projects are taking a long time to release, this is probably why. This is why Strange New Worlds took so long to release its second season. This is why the Fallout series is taking so long for it to release. So studios have prepared for this strike so that fans will not feel the impact until at least the beginning of 2024, if not longer. Again, this all depends on how long this strike lasts. I mean, if you're a fan of Saturday Night Live like I am, or any of the late night talk shows, you're feeling this right now. But like I said, the average fan will probably not see it at the movies or at their streaming service until the beginning of 2024. The Screen Actors Guild and the Directors Guild are set to go on strike in June if no agreement with the writers is met. So I believe it's June 30th would be the last day or the day that everybody walks off set. Studios are already trying to do things to keep people on their sets. Studios can also shift production out of America, and that's why some studios will not be as affected by the strike as others. For instance, Netflix does a lot of business with foreign production companies, so they will have a lot of content that other streaming services will not have because of those agreements. Right now, fans aren't really feeling it, and if the strike with the writers is solved by the end of June, fans may not feel any impact at all. But if it does go past June, then by the beginning of 2024, just your average fan will start feeling the impact of this strike. Now you're probably wondering, well, why is there a strike? Is this just, Hollywood greed? Because it seems pretty obvious that the studios are still making lots and lots of money, and to a certain extent, actors are making a lot of money. But your everyday players and your writers seem to be left behind with a couple of main points that have changed over the last few years. And those two big sticking points and why I think this strike is so important right now have to do with streaming services and AI. The reason that streaming services are so important to this strike is that writers and actors are paid out by residual. Every time my videos get watched, I get a certain percentage of the ad revenue that plays on those commercials. And much like that, writers and actors, whenever something they created or acted in is on TV, they get a residual off that. And when it comes to streaming, it's a smaller percentage residual. But the biggest indicator I found was that in 1985, 1/3 of the working writers in Hollywood made the minimum salary for writers. Just like there's a minimum wage for working at a normal job at McDonald's or anywhere, there is a minimum salary for writers that are part of the Writers Guild. And in 1985, 1/3 of all writers were making that minimum salary. In 2022, 1/2 of all writers were making that salary. And that salary has not increased. So overall, writers are making about 4% less than they were over 20 years ago. That seems crazy to me. I mean, in any line of work, if you see a drop in your revenue over that period of time, that is a really bad indicator of what kind of environment, those writers are working in. And a big reason for this is the influx of streaming services and how more people are watching things on streaming services than they are on just normal, cable and TV. And as I mentioned, the residuals that a writer or actor gets from a streaming network are different than they would from syndicated television. And since streaming has taken off and now is now more popular than syndicated television, these residual numbers have not been changed. So that obviously needs to be changed. I mean, the market has changed. So how the writers get paid out should change with it. I mean, I think that seems pretty obvious. That's a big part of these negotiations. Another big part of these negotiations is how AI, artificial intelligence, will influence Hollywood. Writers and actors are understandably very scared of how AI will change the face of Hollywood, because right now, the technology is at a point where it can write scripts based off inputted parameters. So I can use a program called ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a buddy cop comedy that does this, and they go to San Francisco and the bad guy is a drug dealer, and it will write me a script for TV or for movie based on my parameters. AI can also recreate an actor's voice and visual likeness on screen. So these things are obviously very scary to writers and actors who now basically can be carbon copied using technology. And there's nothing out there that says streaming services or productions or anything can't use this technology to create new stories. And again, this technology is just growing. So where we are at now is not where we will be at in 1 year or 5 years or 10 years. So understandably, the writers and actors of America want some safeguards so that they're not replaced by robots in the very near future. So given these things that I've told you, how close are the two sides in this negotiation? How close are the Writers Guild of America and the producers in Hollywood? Well, not that close, unfortunately. Obviously, this is a very complicated issue. So what I really boiled it down to there were two big proposals made by the WGA that the producers didn't even respond to, which is really, really bad. When you're in a negotiation, well, I say, well, I'll give you 5, then you say you want 8, then I say 6, and we go back and forth until we get somewhere where we're both happy. But in these two cases, the producers didn't even respond to it. They said, we're not even interested in talking about this, but we will talk about other things. So that's really bad. So these are the two proposals given by the WGA that were not given a compromise. One, the WGA wants a minimum of a 6 to 12 person writing staff per show. Now, what this means is that shows will have to have writers on call, on staff, instead of just using them basically as freelance artists. Basically, instead of just buying a script from someone, you have to hire this person, and they can be on set with you working rewrites, or they can do a lot of things, but you have to hire this person for a set amount of time. And that set amount of time is the other part of the proposal that the producers were not given a compromise. And that is that the WGA wants a guaranteed number of weeks of work per season for their writers, ranging from 10 to 52 weeks, so for a year. Both of these things obviously do not sound very greedy to me. I mean, it just sounds like these are people that want to be treated like hired workers and not freelance artists. But again, it doesn't seem like the producers want to make this change because they didn't even give any compromise for those two issues. The proposals given by the WGA and the producers are way off in terms of money. The proposal by the Writers Guild of America would cost studios $429 million more per year. I mean, $429 million is a lot of money, but think about how much money movies make, okay? In that kind of context, $429 million, it's a big matzo ball, but it's not like huge, But the counter proposal from the producers would only cost producers $86 million more a year compared to $429 million. That's how far apart the WGA and the producers are. That is a big, huge matzo ball. For them to get from $429 million to $86 million and find somewhere in the middle by the end of June, that seems very, very unlikely to me. If you remember, there was a writer strike about 15 years ago that affected a lot of Hollywood and cost Hollywood billions and billions of dollars. That lasted 3 months. There's one a couple of decades before that lasted about a few weeks. This one, like I said, is either going to last just 2 or 3 weeks, or it's going to be, I think, longer than 6 months. Like I mentioned, the networks and streaming services have prepared for this strike, probably more so than the writers have. I mean, writers have to work. If they're not writing scripts, then they're not making any money unless all these writers saved a whole lot of money. And I hope they did. And I hope, they're getting support from people. But it looks like the networks right now are more prepared for a long fight than the writers are. So obviously, this is a very complicated situation. I tried to make it as easy to consume as possible. But let me know in the comments, do you understand this more now after I explained it? Do you have a lot more questions? If you have questions, hit me up in the comments and I'll try to answer them the best I can. But obviously, like I said, this is a very complicated issue. In my opinion, you should support the writers on this. Definitely look out for that June stop date. In my opinion, the writers seem like they are in the right here. And they do not seem like they're asking for things that are too crazy. It looks like they're just asking for an honest day's work. And the studios are being studios and they want to hold on to their money. So we'll see what happens. But unfortunately, I think that this could last a very long time because it's going to last until the studios start to feel it. And it looks like the studios are prepared for a long fight. So let me know, what do you think of the strike? And do you have any questions about it? So next, I'd like to talk about what could be a very interesting casualty of this writer's strike. And that is the streaming service Paramount Plus. This last week, Paramount Plus released some good and bad news to the public. For one, the streaming service gained 60 million subscribers in the first quarter, which is good. It shows that the network has been growing. They definitely had some success with Star Trek. Star Trek Picard Season 3 was a hit. Strange New Worlds Season 1 was also a hit. Paramount Plus also had hits with Yellowstone, Mayor of Kingstown, and Tulsa King, which just came out with Sylvester Stallone. But with all that great new content, they still took a big loss in regards to their quarterly earnings and their advertiser revenue. In the first quarter, the streaming service lost $1.23 billion with a B dollars. And with that announcement, the streaming service stock dropped 1/3 of its value in just one day. I believe it has dropped more value since then. That is not good at all. And really, the problem for Paramount Plus is that they're in a position they can't win because they've got 4 streaming services that are more popular than them: Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, and HBO Max, which is soon going to just be called Max, or maybe they're already called Max. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, all of those 4 streaming services are huge, and Paramount Plus, for anything they do, is never going to catch them. They're never going to catch Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, or Max. Behind Paramount Plus in the streaming wars currently are Peacock, who is funded by Universal/Comcast, Apple TV, and Amazon Prime. So while those 3 services are behind Paramount Plus right now, they are way better funded than Paramount is and will eventually take over. So really, Paramount Plus is in a no-win situation. And we're also at a point right now where I think it's agreed upon that there are just too many streaming services. And the public just are tired of trying to remember which streaming service they have to order and what show is on where and what do I need. And you're seeing a lot of these streaming services combine, like we just saw HBO and Discovery combine and Showtime combined with Paramount. You're already seeing the streaming services dwindle down and dwindle down and dwindle down. And I think that the next streaming service that will be dwindled is Paramount Plus. The CFO of Paramount Plus in the past week stated that to cut costs, they're looking to produce content offshore, again, in other countries, which would not be affected by the strikes that I just mentioned earlier. And they're looking to produce content in lower cost formats and beginning to use artificial intelligence tools, which, according to the CFO, produces some really high quality results and very compelling economics. So you can tell already, as I explain the writer's strike and what the writers are looking for, that these issues are very prevalent because you have the CFO of Paramount right now saying that, yeah, we're going to start producing shows in other countries and we're going to start using AI to cut costs. But going back to my point about Paramount Plus, it does look like to me that the best option for Paramount Plus in 2023 would be to just shut its doors and kill the streaming service. Now, what happens to the content on Paramount Plus if it decides to shut its doors? Well, then they become a studio that sells content. So Star Trek wouldn't go away. It's not like if Paramount Plus shut down that all the Star Trek shows would immediately end. Paramount would sell Star Trek to Netflix or Hulu or HBO Max, and they would just get residuals off that airing and produce the content as a studio instead of as a studio and a streaming service. Sony is kind of the archetype for this model. They do not have a streaming service. I believe they briefly flirted with one, but since then they have no streaming service, and now they just sell off their content to other studios. The Spider-Man movies like Into the Spider-Verse, you've got the Craven movie coming out soon. All those were sold off to other producers so they just could create the content and then make money off the residuals. So I think that makes more sense for Paramount Plus to do in the future. It does look like they've slowed down with Star Trek. You know, they were going to produce a film and have 5 series going at the same time. Now we have one film that is going right to streaming in Section 31, and we only have 2 live series in Strange New Worlds and Starfleet Academy, and we have Lower Decks and Prodigy, but Prodigy may not continue after season 2. So it does look like Paramount is starting to dwindle down Star Trek as well. So it may behoove Star Trek to get produced by a different streaming service so Paramount can concentrate on just creating Star Trek and somebody else can distribute it. But let me know, what do you think about Paramount Plus shutting down? I think that this could be a very interesting casualty of this writer's strike because it makes a lot of sense for Paramount Plus to do this. I don't see a way for them to win. There's no way they're going to be a bigger streaming service than any of the 4 in front of them. And sooner or later, the 3 behind them are going to catch them. And they're going to be losing billions of dollars just to be in like 7th place, which makes no sense to me. So I believe that by the end of 2023, we could see Paramount Plus shutting its doors. But let me know, what do you think of Paramount Plus? Do you like the service, or would you not mind if Star Trek was just released on Netflix or Hulu in the future? Let me know in the comments below. All right, so now let's talk about some good news, and that is Babylon 5 having a new movie coming out. Babylon 5 will be releasing an animated movie very soon from Warner Brothers Animation. JMS, J. Michael Straczynski, announced via Twitter, and here's his quote: "It's classic B5, raucous, heartfelt, nonstop, a ton of fun through time and space, and a love letter to the fans. Movie title, release date, and other details coming 1 week from today." He also said that the film is already finished and in the can, and that it feels the most B5-ish of anything we've done since the original show. Now, this film does not have anything to do with the reboot series that I've talked about a couple of times on this channel that was in development at the CW back in 2021. The CW hardly exists anymore, and I would not be surprised if we don't actually ever get to see a live-action reboot of the series, which would be too bad. That was very exciting when they announced it. But in lieu of that, we do have this animated film. Now, the fact that this isn't going to be a reboot kind of makes me think like this animated film will be a continuation of the stories from the original series and possibly some of the content they released after the series went off the air, which means we also could have some voice actors returning. And I'm pretty sure that we will, in fact, get some of the original cast back for this project. Before you scoff at the idea of an animated film, animation has come a long way in the last few years. I mean, Star Wars in particular has done a lot with animation and created, the Clone Wars and all these different projects that became so popular that now they're working those animated characters into their live action series. I also mentioned in my discussion about the writer's strike that animated projects are not affected by the Writers Guild or the Screen Actors Guild strike. So we may see a lot more animated movies in the near future if this strike goes on for months and months. And the fact that JMS is behind it, you know that it's going to be authentic. He's very excited about this. I think he's been talking about this project for about a year. So it's nice that he's actually able to announce it in full now. And hopefully in the next week, we'll be given more details about when this will come out. I'm guessing it will come out on Max, since Warner Brothers owns Max. And once I get that news, I will share it with you on this channel as well. So let me know, what do you think about this news? Are you excited for a Babylon 5 animated movie? Are you just not a fan of animation, so you don't care about it? Do you just not care about Babylon 5? I'm really interested to see what studio is animating it, because you can kind of tell what kind of animation will be used based on what studio is going to be animating it. So once we hear that information, that should tell us something too. So let me know, what do you think about the news of a new animated movie about Babylon 5? Now I'd like to talk about the film Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, if you have not watched the movie yet, I will first do a no spoilers review, and then I will get into spoilers and let you know and warn you before I do that. So first, for my no spoilers review, my first note about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is that the DC movie universe is in very good hands with James Gunn. James Gunn wrote or co-wrote and directed all 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies, as well as the Christmas special that came out this year. James Gunn is also responsible for the DC film, The Suicide Squad, as well as the DC series, The Peacemaker. And since creating the Guardians of the Galaxy films for the MCU, he has taken over as the head of the DC Comics movie universe, which means that most of all the new films being created by DC will be produced under the umbrella of James Gunn. And I'm just so impressed with him as a creator. I think that he did such a good job with these films. I mean, think about it. The Guardians of the Galaxy are so popular now. And before this first film was released, nobody had hardly even heard of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And now you could make a argument that out of all of the characters, besides the Avengers, that were given a trilogy of films, that the Guardians of the Galaxy were the ones that fans liked the most. So I just think that the MCU lost a very big talent in James Gunn, and I'm sure they're sorry that they don't have him for future movies, but I'm sure that the DC movie universe is very happy that James Gunn is there, and I'm very much looking forward to the films that now get created in the DC movie universe. I was never a huge fan of like the Zack Snyder movies. I like them. I like Zack Snyder as a creator. I just didn't think the characters felt very much like their DC comic book counterparts. I thought they felt like new characters, and something was lost in translation there. So I think that James Gunn will do a different job with these characters, and I'm very much looking forward to that, given how much I like the characters he created in Guardians of the Galaxy. I also have a note here that everything that Ant-Man 3 did wrong, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 got right. For instance, there are some cameos in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 without going into spoilers. There are also some cameos in Ant-Man 3, but in Ant-Man 3, they felt very forced and out of place, but all the cameos in Guardians of the Galaxy felt like more than fan service. They felt like they actually had a part to the story, and they filled it more than were just a member berry for fans to say oh, I know who that is, or I recognize that actor. Everything really felt like it had its place. And also the different locations in Guardians of the Galaxy looked amazing, just like the ones in Ant-Man 3 did, but they looked more lived in and patched together. Everything in Ant-Man 3 seems so perfect and so, cosmic, I guess is for lack of a better term. And while Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was definitely very cosmic, it felt more lived in. It felt real, even though it was all CGI, just like Ant-Man 3 was, it just felt, like things fell apart and you'd walk by something and something would fall off the wall. I don't know, something silly like that to me makes the scenery look more realistic, even though we're obviously looking at CGI. Also for this film, I love the shift in focus from the Peter Quill character to Rocket. Again, I don't think that is a spoiler. That's been out there for a while. Peter Quill, played by Chris Pratt, was pretty much the focus of the Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 film. In 3, the focus definitely shifts to Rocket. Honestly, Star-Lord, Peter Quill, I find to be the least interesting character of all the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'm fine with that. I mean, Star-Lord to me is just pretty much like your archetype Flash Gordon style hero, whereas the other characters in Guardians of the Galaxy are really strange and have interesting backstories and powers and personalities. So I like that. I like that Chris Pratt's character was able to kind of step back, or at least step to the side, while we were following Rocket's story. And I also thought that Chukwudi Iwuji as the High Evolutionary was one of the best MCU villains yet. I probably butchered his actual name. I apologize. The actor actually appeared in the show Peacemaker, which, as I mentioned, James Gunn had directed and released last year. I thought he just created a really good villain with the High Evolutionary. He's one of those villains that thinks he's a hero, which is very compelling to me. I liked how his story kind of evolved over the course of the movie, how we learned stuff about him in the past and in the present. He wasn't just one of these gray aliens. Probably my favorite villain since Eric Killmonger that the MCU has produced. Now, there were a couple things also that I wasn't a huge fan of. The character Adam Warlock is introduced in this movie. Again, not a spoiler because he's in the trailers. I thought he was kind of unneeded. In a way, I feel like Adam Warlock was a check that James Gunn had to cash at some point in Guardians of the Galaxy, because he has been teased in one form or another since the first movie. And it seems like he just had to have him in this movie. So he put him in, and it just seemed at times like he was unneeded. He comes and goes throughout the film, and his arc is kind of all over the place. And he's a really interesting character. I mean, the comics, he has a huge backstory and he has connections to some of the biggest plot lines in the comics. But in this movie, he just seemed like an unneeded, like, background character. I thought that either they could have done more with him or just kept him out of this movie altogether and used him somewhere else. And then also, I thought that Gamora was underused. Without going into spoilers, I like that you can definitely tell that this is a different Gamora than the Gamora that was in the first two Guardians movies. I mean, if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame yet, I don't know what to tell you, but in Avengers Endgame, we get two Gamoras because of displacement in time and space, basically. So this is a different Gamora than were in the prior films, even though it's played by the same actress. But I like that. I like that they kept with that. But having said that, I would have liked to seen her a little bit more. She disappears for a good part of the movie and then reappears, and obviously she's talked about a lot more, I think, than she is on screen. So I would have liked to have seen Gamora a little bit more, especially if we're not going to see, the Guardians of the Galaxy in another film again. Now, having said that, I think I will delve into the spoiler section of my review. So if you have not seen the movie yet, you might want to fast forward to the final section of this video. My first spoiler comment is I love how they teased us with the death of multiple characters throughout the film without killing off anyone. I think that was my favorite part of the movie, that you're just almost sure that at least one of the main characters is going to die, if not multiple. I think at least three characters, Drax, Rocket, and Star-Lord, have situations where you think like, whoa, they might not get out of this one. And they, of course, ultimately do. So I really liked that. I thought that was really smart. And it really like kept me on the edge of my seat as to, up until really the end of the movie, which of these characters is going to survive. I also really like that even though at the end the team breaks up, nobody had to die. Like they're able to end this trilogy of movies with these characters without having to kill them off. It does allow for these characters to come back in the future, even though I know a couple of the actors like Dave Bautista have said that they have no interest in returning to play their character. Besides it being different than what we're used to, it also made the ending very happy. We weren't having to mourn anyone while also being happy for these other characters. I thought that was really smart and made the ending great. I love the ending of this movie. Really, the third act, the whole third act of this film, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, might be one of the best third acts of any of the MCU films that aren't the Avengers movies. I also like the bad guys. I thought besides just the main villain, the High Evolutionary, I liked his underlings, and I even liked, like the pieced together and sentient animal, like cyborg guys. I really thought those were cool. They reminded me of the bad guys from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like Bebop and Rocksteady. I thought it was really cool, and it really spoke to James Gunn's influence from Troma Studios. If you're not familiar with Troma Studios, they produce movies like The Toxic Avenger. Actually, Lloyd Kaufman, the creator of Troma Studios, is in this movie, as well as the first Guardians. I'm not sure if he's in the second one. James Gunn started his career, his first movie was from Troma Studios, and he remembers where he came from. And Troma is known for having like a lot of like weird violence. And there was a lot of weird violence, you could say, in this movie. And I thought it was great. I loved that, the bad guys weren't just like gray aliens, that they were just like pieced together and kind of gross, and everything was falling apart and bloody and scabbed. And that was just really cool. You just don't really see that very much in MCU films. I also really thought this was the darkest MCU film yet. And that's okay. I know everybody's talking about that the first F-bomb was used in this movie, and that's like whatever. Like, I don't even care about that. But it is a very dark movie. I mean, a whole planet gets nuked like in a second. You see somebody's face get ripped off. You see the heroes kill somebody in cold blood. That's really dark for the MCU. And even think about that death scene, or almost death scene, with Rocket and him, talking to his friends in the afterlife. That was just a bunch of talking animals. How heartfelt was that scene? Like how how crazy is that they made like a scene with these talking animals that heartfelt and that meaningful? I thought that was really cool. I mean, it was dark. A lot of this movie is dark, but I think it's okay that this film did go to those dark places because it ends so happy. So I think that you leave the movie feeling happy, and that makes the darker parts of this movie not stay with you as much after you leave the film. And then having said all this, I really think that this is now my favorite MCU trilogy. If you remember, Iron Man got a trilogy, Thor got one, Ant-Man got one, and Captain America got one. Captain America, up until this point, was my favorite trilogy, and now I'd have to say that Guardians of the Galaxy is. And again, that's just crazy to say that Guardians of the Galaxy was better than a movie about Iron Man or Captain America or Thor when those characters started out so much more popular than the Guardians of the Galaxy. And now here we are, and James Gunn has built these characters up so that they're actually better on film than Iron Man or Captain America. I just think is a great accomplishment. So I thought that this movie was awesome, probably one of my favorite MCU films ever. So let me know, did you see this movie? What were your thoughts of it? And how do you think it stacks up against the other MCU films that have been released? And then finally, I want to talk about this leak, supposed leak, that was released over the past week on Twitter from the Fallout series. This would be the Amazon series that will be released hopefully later this year based on the Fallout games. There have been, over the course of the past year, different pictures from filming released, and I have shared a lot of those pictures with you on this channel. One came to my attention this week, and I wasn't going to report on it at first because I don't think it's real, or at least it's not what fans think. So this is the picture in question, and what has fans up in arms is the character on the left, who would be a ghoul, one of the main types of characters from the Fallout series. If you're not familiar with the Fallout series, ghouls are human beings that have been irradiated by the fallout from the Great War and have survived sometimes hundreds of years. And in some cases, they're sentient, and like you can see in this picture, this one's smoking a cigarette and having a conversation. And some of them are feral and just attack people on sight. Now, this picture is supposed to be a picture from the series, but I don't think it's real. Now, either this is a complete fabrication and somebody just drew this and released it with an actual picture of this extra from the show, because Vault 33 is the vault that we know is in the series Fallout. But the character on the left, who's supposed to be a ghoul, it's obviously completely CGI. I don't think there's any practical effects done here. I think that this is a space holder. I think that this is not the actual ghoul that we will see when the show is released. I think that this is just a marker for the computer graphic artists to use so that when they do come up with the actual design, they can just apply it to this template and then use it going forward. So basically what that means in a long-winded way is that they can move on to other parts of working on this series while also working on the design for a ghoul. And when they come up with the design for the ghoul, they can go back and then input that everywhere without having to wait for that design and having to not be able to work on other scenes. So either this picture right here is a complete fake created by somebody in their bedroom, or I think it's just a CGI placeholder, and this will not be what a ghoul looks like when we see it. Because in my opinion, this is just really bad. I mean, I think even the shadows of both characters look kind of off to me. So I don't think this is real, but it could be. And if it is, I'm going to be really disappointed. Honestly, you know, you have a main character as a ghoul. So with that, you're going to have a lot of close-up shots of the character talking and things like that. I would think that you would do a better job designing ghouls than just like this burn victim kind of Freddy Krueger thing going on you see here. I don't think that this is going to be what we see as a ghoul when the Fallout series is released. But let me know, what do you think of this? Do you think this is an actual leak, that this is what the ghouls will look like when the Fallout series is released? Or do you agree with me that this is just a fake, or that this is a placeholder for when they actually do the design of a ghoul and they can input it into scenes after they're done? Well, that's all I have this week. Thank you very much for joining me. Remember, the best way to support the work that I do is to hit the like button on this video, as well as subscribe to my channel so that you can know when my new videos come out. I do release new podcasts every Monday and various videos across the week. So thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?